Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this special report right here on the Riley King Network. History of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Let's get started.
On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people gathered in the nation's capital for the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The march rallied Americans to stand up against the continuing political and social injustices African Americans still faced 100 years after emancipation. The march took place at a critical moment in the civil rights movement. Tension and racial unrest had been building up throughout the year, with anti-segregation demonstrators making headlines in Alabama and President John F. Kennedy announcing his intention to pass civil rights legislation. The timing was right for a massive demonstration. Due to security concerns, internal marshals were trained to ensure order within the crowd. But as it turned out, the marchers chose peace, not violence, that sunny Wednesday. The event featured speeches from prominent leaders and musical performances by Josephine Baker, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Mahalia Jackson, and many others. The march is probably best remembered for Martin Luther King Jr.'s acclaimed "I Have a Dream" speech. But we bet you didn't know the real story behind those famous words. King was the last speaker that afternoon, but not because he chose to be. King only spoke last that day because no one else wanted to. When organizers of the march debated who would speak when and for how long, none of the other speakers wanted the last slot because they figured most of the news crews would head out by mid-afternoon. King agreed to go last and to limit his remarks to only 4 minutes. And he didn't have to worry about not making the news. The audience gladly stuck around for his 16-minute speech. And you might be surprised to learn that King hadn't even intended to talk about his now famous dream that day. During a pause in his prepared speech, Mahalia Jackson called out from behind the podium, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." She was referring to a theme King had touched on in a speech 2 months earlier in Detroit. Honoring her request, King departed from his prepared remarks and delivered the legendary speech we all remember today. Historians believe that the marches and King's speech were important catalysts in passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Today, a memorial marks the spot where Martin Luther King described his dream of a better America in one of the most influential and memorable speeches in American history.
Okay, that is the history of Martin Luther King Day. And that does it for my special right here on the Riley King Network. I hope you all have a great Monday, everyone. Goodbye.